Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to get the core insights from important sources.
That's right, we break it down for you.
And today, we're tackling a really big one. Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death.
Huge book, very influential. It pulls together so many threads, psychology, theology.
It's ambitious, for sure. Trying to figure out what meaningful human survival is all about.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to really get at Becker's central argument, this idea that our relationship with death, our awareness of it, basically shapes everything we do.
Yeah, it's foundational to his whole approach. He looks straight at the thing we usually avoid, the fact that we die, and says, okay, how does this drive us?
Right, that ambition is probably why it struck such a chord.
I think so. It asks the big questions.
Okay, let's jump right in. The core idea. The terror of death as a primary motivator. Becker argues this isn't just some background noise. It's deep, often unconscious, but it fuels our actions.
He even references Shaler, right, that quote about heroism.
Yeah, that it's basically a reflex against this terror, our admiration for bravery, for facing extinction. It's tied to our own fear.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Is courage just about fighting our own mortality?
So the key insight here, fear isn't passive, it's an active force.
And you see that reflected historically. Becker talks about how ancient religions, mystery cults, they were all trying to solve this problem.
How to live knowing you'll die.
Exactly. Rituals, afterlife beliefs. He mentions things like an immunity bath against death, ways to cope.
It makes sense. You need some way to handle that knowledge.
Definitely.
And then he brings in the psychoanalytic angle, which is fascinating. The idea that a child's inner world is full of terror.
But not because of instincts, like an animal.
Right.
Because they lack them.
Right. Their fears get shaped by perception, by experience. They're kind of thrown in without a manual.
It makes them incredibly vulnerable to anxiety, not like an animal instinctively knowing danger. It's more existential.
But Becker also mentions a counterpoint, doesn't he? The life force idea.
Like Zorba the Greek, someone so fully absorbed in living.
That maybe the fear just doesn't register or gets absorbed.
Yeah. Could total immersion in life be a way around it? It's an interesting thought.
But is it the basic anxiety? The fear of death? Becker acknowledges the debate.
He does. He mentions Jacques Chiron questioning if we can ever really know for sure.
So Becker thinks it's primary, but it's not like settled science.
Exactly. He's showing the complexity, not giving easy answers, which is typical Becker, really. Nuanced.
Okay, so if this terror is humming away underneath, how do we actually manage it day to day?
Well, that's where character armor comes in. He borrows that term from Wilhelm Reich.
Character armor, like psychological defenses.
Pretty much. The mechanisms we build up, our habits, our personality styles, they help us feel safe. And deep down, they help us deny mortality.
So we build these walls.
But there's a cost. And this is crucial. The armor might feel safe, but Becker says we pay a price.
Which is?
Repression. We push down bodily feelings, maybe sacrifice pleasure. We get kind of encapsulated. Trying to avoid death, we end up, well, less alive.
Wow. That's a paradox.
It really is.
And then there's a second line of defense, society's role.
Yeah, the hero system. This is where culture comes in.
Okay, explain that.
Society gives us these frameworks, these ways to believe we can transcend our individual death by participating in something bigger, something lasting.
So our ambitions, our drive, it's often fueled by wanting immortality.
In a symbolic sense, yeah. Think about the examples. Conquering empires, sure, but also
building things, writing books, having families.
Exactly. Raising kids, getting rich, scientific progress, even, creating our modern information society. All paths to feeling like you've made a mark, that something of you will last.
Culture creates these symbolic systems to manage the fear without us even realizing it.
Right. The pursuit of heroism, whatever form it takes in your culture, becomes life's main task. It's like a game we're all playing to keep death at bay.
And this connects to even altruism, wanting to serve higher causes.
Becker suggests even that can be double-edged. The desire to merge with something larger can, paradoxically, lead to conflict, violence. He calls it a death potlatch.
Sacrificing for the cause.
Yeah. Our noblest ideals and our deepest fears get tangled up. It's pretty sobering.
It really is. He also contrasts that primitive belief, death as a promotion, with how hard that is for us modern Westerners to genuinely buy into anymore.
Right. And maybe that lack of a convincing next stage makes the fear more intense for us now?
Could be. Yeah. Without that built-in cultural comfort.
And anxiety might just be stronger, yeah.
Okay, let's shift to another big theme. This dualism, the conflict between body and self.
The core human predicament, really, our physical body, mortal, decaying, the 98 cents worth of chemicals quip,
Yeah.
versus our symbolic self.
Yeah.
The part that thinks, dreams, craves infinite worth, meaning.
How do we even hold those two together?
It's tough, especially for a child. They're born with this awareness developing, but without the tools to manage it. Becker calls them premature in facing the world.
Thrown into the deep end.
Pretty much.
He quotes Pascal right. Not to be mad would amount to another form of madness.
Perfect quote for it. That tension, trying to live fully as body or fully as spirit, it's inherently unstable. You ignore one side, you're living a kind of lie.
And this instability shows up in weird ways, like anality.
Yeah, Becker dives into that, sees it as this primal protest against accident, against decay, ultimately against death. Excrement becomes the symbol of our physical limits, our connection to mortality.
It's pretty visceral.
It is. He mentions Swift's horror born between urine and feces, really driving home that gap between our lofty ideas and our, messy biology.
That bluntness seems key to Becker, grounding it all in the uncomfortable facts of being human.
Absolutely. Denying death often means denying the body, too.
Now, the Oedipus complex. Becker uses Norman O. Brown's take, right? The Oedipal project.
Yeah, it's less about literal desire for the parent and more about the child's struggle to be an agent, to control their destiny, not just be passively shaped by fate.
The drive for autonomy.
Exactly. And that ties into wanting to be kazasui.
One's own cause.
Yes.
Self-created.
Right. Brown and Becker see this as a kind of necessary narcissism, maybe, but ultimately fueled by running away from death. The child first sees the mother as everything, an extension of their will.
But then they realize they're dependent.
And that's when the defiance kicks in. It becomes less about sex, maybe, and more about establishing, I am my own person.
It's a power struggle for independence.
Fundamentally. But ultimately, Becker says, it leads to this tragic dethroning, trying to achieve that self-caused ideal purely through the body. It can't work.
Because the body is finite, vulnerable.
Precisely. The body, as this narcissistic fortress, eventually crumbles. It's a big disillusionment.
Which leads to another really interesting idea. The Jonah syndrome.
Ah, yes. Not fearing death, but fearing life. Fearing your own potential.
So you play small, self-sabotage.
Kind of. It's a defense against feeling overwhelmed by your own possibilities, by grandiosity. You shrink yourself because bearing the superlative feels too heavy.
Why would someone fear their own potential?
Becker links it to lacking the inner strength to face the sheer totality of experience. He brings in Otto's mysterium tremendum et fascinosum.
That overwhelming sense of awe and terror before the universe.
Exactly. It can make you feel tiny, insignificant. Some people recoil from that feeling.
And this is where repression becomes useful.
A great boon, Becker calls it. It filters reality. If we saw the full, miraculous, terrifying picture all the time, we'd be paralyzed. Repression lets us focus, act decisively.
Because humans are uniquely burdened, right? No programmed instincts like animals.
We're wide open. We can contemplate infinities. Our own existence is a puzzle. Everything's a problem to be solved in a way.
So, we fear death, but we also fear life. That seems like a trap.
It is. Becker, drawing on Otto Rank, really emphasizes this. It's not just fear of death, but fear of life, fear of experience, of becoming fully individual.
Heidegger's anxiety of being in the world.
That's the one. We're uneasy just existing, but also scared to fully embrace it with all its risks and unknowns. We shrink back.
Becker's picture of the planet is pretty bleak sometimes. Nightmarish, demonic frenzy.
Yeah, life itself can feel like a threat. Consuming energy, overwhelming us, always with the backdrop of accident, illness, death.
It's intense.
Very.
And this fear of life brings us back to the character armor.
Absolutely. Becker says it's vital, shedding it completely, facing the full despair that risks madness. It's a necessary shell.
He uses that Freud quote, psychoanalysis cures neurotic misery, only to introduce you to common human misery.
Right. Neurosis becomes a strategy, maybe a bad one, to avoid that bigger existential dread.
Like creating smaller problems to distract from the ultimate one.
Could be. Pearl's idea of layers fits here, too. The deepest layer is that fear of death one.
And you only get to the authentic self by breaking through it.
That's the idea, stripping away the defenses against fear. So character becomes a kind of lie about reality, a defense against the terror. Sartre's useless passion thriving on fantasy.
And this marks a shift from early Freud, right? From the child against the world to the child needing defenses from its overwhelmingness.
Yes, a subtle but important shift. It's less about internal drives fighting society and more about coping with the sheer intensity of existence itself.
Okay, now Kierkegaard enters the picture. Becker sees him as a kind of proto-psychoanalyst.
Absolutely. Ahead of his time, his insights into dread or angst anticipated so much.
And for Kierkegaard, dread comes from freedom, possibility.
But Becker zeroes in on the focal point, the knowledge of our own death, that unique human sentence. That's what ultimately fuels the dread.
Kierkegaard analyzed how we fail, right? By not facing that truth.
Yeah, the truth of being a symbolic self in a finite body, trying to be only spirit or only body, it's living a lie.
And if the lie gets too big, psychosis.
The breakdown of character. Kierkegaard's demoniac rage, defiant self-creation that attacks life itself. That's the extreme denial.
So transcendence means facing the truth, dispelling the character lie.
Breaking free from the conditioned prisons we build. But it's terrifying. People cling to the familiar, even if it's limiting. The freedom of the wide world is scary.
We want freedom, but we fear it too.
The great paradox.
Let's talk about Freud's own struggles, his ambivalence towards death and yielding.
Becker notes how early psychoanalysis kind of skirted around our basic creatureliness. Freud later tried to address it.
But he remained a bit bound by his original theories.
Somewhat. Becker argues Freud's death instinct was a way to keep the terror of death slightly outside his main ego mastery framework.
Framing it as an innate drive, not an anxiety to be managed.
Right, less about fear of annihilation, more like a pull toward dissolution. Rank pointed out how this cleverly shifted death from something feared to something almost desired instinctually.
So it compartmentalized the terror. In a way, yes. It let him keep the pleasure principle more central.
But personally, Freud was obsessed with death.
Deeply. Always trying to figure out his own motivations, even late in life.
And his difficulty with yielding. That fainting story with Jung.
Yeah, Becker suggests it shows a discomfort with dependence, maybe with the feminine side, acknowledging needing something outside the self.
Tied to the genius needing to earn value through work.
Yeah.
Immortality via creation.
And maybe guilt about surpassing the father figure.
Yeah.
It's complex. Ego, ambition, mortality fears, all mixed up.
So yielding means giving up that Cosa Sui project, admitting we need external support.
Exactly. Acknowledging we can't bear existence alone. That our meaning often comes from connection. Something Freud, with his focus on ego strength, perhaps struggled with.
Which brings us neatly to transference. Becker sees it as more than just a clinical tool.
Much more. Tied to fear of life, the urge to heroism, it's fundamental.
So transference is our patterned way of reacting, based on parents, right?
Yeah, the child trying to recreate safety, often distorting the present based on the past, making the new feel familiar, even if that familiar is anxious.
Different analysts saw it differently. Adler saw it as clinging to old patterns, giving away power.
While Jung saw it as a chance to reclaim projected parts of ourselves, integration.
And Becker's synthesis.
He sees it as taming terror. We project the overwhelming power of the universe onto specific people, makes it feel manageable.
The transference object gets imbued with this power to soothe us.
Right. And it happens collectively, too. Group psychology, identifying with heroes for a taste of immortality.
But Becker flips it slightly. It's not just cowardice.
No. It's also a reflex of that heroism urge, striving to grow, to unfold.
Driven by that inner desire to be good, attraction to perfection, our conscience.
We try to overcome our flaws by conforming to the ideals we project onto transference objects, developing heroic traits they'd admire.
Which explains the inner critic, never measuring up to the ideal.
Exactly. And that tension, wanting to merge, lose isolation, but also stay individual, expand through the other, but remain yourself.
We need others to affirm us, boobers imagining the real.
Absolutely. The transference object's natural awesomeness validates us. So Becker says transference is universal, a natural attempt to heal, to become whole through heroic expansion in the other. It's the basis of therapy.
Seeking wholeness through connection.
That's the core of it.
Okay, connecting this to love, heroism, and art. Culture as a hero system.
Absorbing our creatureliness through denial narratives, shared stories that help us transcend our animal nature.
Like the Judeo-Christian view giving cosmic heroism even to the insignificant.
A powerful framework. But now, Becker says, modern people often pour that same energy into romantic love.
Making the partner into a kind of god.
Almost. It turns love into a religious problem with impossible expectations. Rank saw this dependence in love as the Casa Sui project continuing, seeking justification without God.
but a partner can't provide ultimate fulfillment.
No. And that dependency breeds resentment. Confusing personal love with cosmic heroism leads to disappointment, attacking partners for being human.
So where does the artist fit in?
The artist consciously creates their own heroic framework. A different response. Rank's art and artist is key here. They take control of the meaning-making.
Becker mentions eros and agape too, self-assertion versus self-surrender.
Right. Rank thought true validation comes from surrendering to the bigness of nature, agape, conquering death through connection, not ego.
And Rank turning to Kierkegaard wasn't weakness.
No, Becker argues it was the logical endpoint of their shared understanding of the human condition, recognizing the power of existential questions.
That's amazing how he weaves it all together. Psychology, philosophy, art.
It's a remarkable synthesis.
Okay, let's talk neurosis. Becker sees it as failed heroism and says normality requires illusion.
Basically, yeah. Normalcy involves narrowing your view, refusing some aspects of reality. Healthy minds often need a degree of, let's say, selective focus.
So neurosis is when those illusions break down. The world feels too much.
Exactly. Guilt might even come from unlived life, potential we haven't used.
And obsessions, phobias.
Results of excessive focusing, fetishizing parts of the world, narrowing experience too much. Neurosis can be creative power gone wrong, trapped in transference.
The neurotic internalizes reality too much, loses their claim to life, or cuts themselves off.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe. Becker even wonders if the difference between a neurotic and a genius is just the quality of their reaction to the same underlying perception of anxiety.
One creates, the other gets stuck.
Perhaps. He keeps coming back to character as a lie about reality that caused the Sui Project. Neurosis is opting out because maintaining the necessary illusions is too hard.
Which proves life needs illusions.
Seems to be his point. Which leads to the big question, what level of illusion are you living on? An illusion here means creative play, necessary self-justification, not just falsehoods.
Losing cultural illusions feels like death.
Yes, like deculturation in traditional societies. We need those shared meanings.
This leads to the limits of psychology and the need for true religion.
Becker critiques the Enlightenment idea that science alone brings happiness. Echoes rank psychology, can't fix everything.
Why not?
It focuses on neurotic guilt, not the deeper creature guilt of just being alive and finite. So it only addresses part of our unhappiness. Rank felt psychology couldn't fully replace religious moral frameworks.
It can't answer the ultimate questions.
Right. Rank saw the neurotic trying to find immortality just within their own ego, a doomed project. Psychosis is taking that even further, into total unreality. Neurosis is like striving for an individual religion.
And how neurosis looks depends on the culture, the time.
Definitely. Religion, Becker argues, solves the transference problem by directing awe and terror outwards, cosmically. Takes the burden of self-justification off the individual ego.
Provides external meaning.
Exactly.
What about the therapeutic revolution itself? Psychoanalysis. Becker sees illusions there too.
He sees contradictions. Powerful truths, phrased maybe untruthfully. He warns against ditching Freud's bodily focus for just role theories. Need to keep the foundation.
He contrasts the neurotic artiste manqué with the schizophrenic crippled by fear, highlighting ego control.
Yeah, the ability to manage the anxiety is key. He even touches on perversion as maybe a protest against conformity, asserting freedom via the body. It's complex.
And fetishism, not just castration anxiety.
Becker argues the core is more existential, confronting our animality. The fetish object becomes a charm, transforming animality into transcendence, giving courage, especially for sex.
Making the physical feel sacred.
Right. And secrecy is key, creating a private reality, a sense of control. But it's limited, a private religion based on fear, not faith, often linked to insecurity.
A distorted attempt to manage the overwhelming world.
And the anxiety of intimacy. Standardized cues of attractiveness also help manage the partner's awesomeness.
So mental illness, perversion, their failed heroics, ways of dealing with the terror when you can't cope.
That's how Becker frames it. The real question is, in what cosmology, what meaning system do you perform your heroics? Where do you find your justification?
Need to submit to the highest reality, not human substitutes.
Which makes psychiatry and religion intertwined domains. Both deal with human nature, ultimate meaning. These private religions aren't false, just less expansive, less effective.
Leading to Epictetus's question, what kind of perversity is fitting for man?
A profound question about finding meaningful ways to live with our nature.
Okay, wrapping up with belief and faith. Everyone has an immortality formula.
Some conviction about their worldview, conscious or not. We all have answers, implicit ones, to the big questions.
Kierkegaard distinguished belief intellectual agreement from faith.
Faith as a leap. Trust, surrender. Becker says it feels like grace, a dubbing from something higher, not something you just decide intellectually.
Does Becker push for sainthood?
Not necessarily. He suggests many ways to be good, fulfill potential, and argues we can't evolve without character. Those structures are fundamental.
He critiques utopian ideas of unrepression.
Yeah, says they miss the point about transference, our need for structures. Reef's idea. We need embodied morality, anchors in the flux.
And the paradox. A utopia of long life might make us more obsessed with death, less expansive.
An interesting thought. He notes modern people, like primitives, often don't see the death-denying function of their own beliefs. Consumerism, psychology.
He's critical of therapy's promises sometimes. Self-knowledge illusions.
Can be. Psychology can become a substitute religion, borrowing mystical language, disciples fetishizing their master's techniques.
But he thinks religion needs psychology to work for outside support.
Seems so. A fusion. But he warns therapeutic prophets against fixing human limits, against megalomania that ignores harsh realities.
Need to balance inner work and external constraints.
Absolutely. Taking life seriously means acknowledging the tragic dimension, our limits. But still, the direction is expansion, growth, driven by some unknown purpose.
Embrace the journey, limitations and all.
That seems to be the takeaway.
All right, so let's try and bring this deep dive into Becker's denial of death together. The core argument. Our fear of death, often unconscious, is this massive driver. It shapes our psychology, our societies.
Right, leading to defenses, character armor, and these big societal hero systems, all aimed at denying or transcending our mortality.
And the heart of it is that tension. The human condition. Finite body, infinite aspirations. Physical limits versus the yearning for meaning, for permanence.
It's a constant struggle, that reconciliation.
Okay, so the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about your own life, your actions, ambitions, beliefs. How might they, in subtle ways, be shaped by this awareness of mortality?
And if you really understand that connection, how does it shift your view of your own goals or the cultural values you live by? Does it change anything?
Definitely encourages deeper reflection. We'd absolutely recommend reading The Denial of Death itself and maybe some of the thinkers Becker engages with.
For sure. There's a lot more to explore in these really profound questions about being human, being conscious in a finite world.